Excellent. Okay, so we're on the top of Lamed Beis Amud Aleph. So we had a Mishnah that said that if a person made an neder to be a Nazir, he thought that maybe the lashon that he used wasn't really effective. So he started acting as if he wasn't a Nazir. He was drinking wine and cutting his hair and doing things you're not allowed to do when you're a Nazir. We'll leave aside being Natame Lames because that becomes more complicated. So let's assume he wasn't necessarily doing that. But the Mishnah says if he went to a Chacham afterwards to kind of be okay the Naziris, so to confirm that the lashon that he used didn't make him a Nazir, and the Chacham said, no, it did make you a Nazir. So he says, but I wasn't acting like a Nazir the last 10 days or so. So the Gemara says, no, it still counts. Mona Misha Shinadar. If he was a Nazir 10 days after he made his vow, even if he was drinking wine the whole time, it's still so. He didn't have but it still counts towards his Nazir. So the Gemara says, Mani Masnisen, Love Rabbi Yossi, Love Abundance. The Mishnah seems to be going neither like Rabbi Yossi, nor the Chachamim. The Tanya, because the Brisa says, Mishanada Rava Nazir. So a person violated the Nazirus. So what happens to the days that they violated the Nazirus? Anis kakin lo. We don't pay attention to them to allow them to bring their kabbanos. Ele im kain, unless they noeg behen iser kiyam shnag bem heter. The Tanakam and the Chachamim say that the person has to redo all the days that they violated their Nazirus. That's against our Mishnah. Rabbi Yossi says, well, if it was a Nazirus Meruba, let's say it was a 50-day Nazirus term or something like that, so and they violated 40 days, so they only have to make up 30 days of those 40 days. So we're going to go with the girsa of the Rosh over here. So if it's going like a Chachamim, Kasha, Nazirus Meruba, so even if it will be a Nazirus Meruba, it doesn't, there's a Kasha either way, because according to the Chachamim, whatever days they counted are going to have to be redone, whether it was a regular Nazirus of 30 days, whether it's a Nazirus of like 50 days and they already violated 40 days, they're going to have to redo the 40 days. And our Mishnah says you don't have to redo anything. So it's a big kasha, no matter what term of the Nazirus it was. According to the Chachamim, it's a big kasha. According to Rabbi Yossi, I would say, okay, it's a kasha, not in the case of the Nazirus Meruba. I'm going to change the gear. So thank you. But it's a kasha in the case of the Nazirus Muetis. Because in the case of Nazirus Muetis, for sure, of 30 days, Rabbi Yossi says you have to redo 30 days. The person would have to, for sure, redo up to 30 days. So he'll have to redo everything that he did wrong, which is against the Mishnah. Maybe there's a Nazirus Meruba will say, he gets to count some of the days. If he violated 40 days, it's a 50-day Nazirus, he only has to redo 30 days. So our Mishnah is saying he can at least count 10 of the days. I can interpret the Mishnah, that way. So Iba is some Tema. So we're going to answer up the Mishnah, either both according to Rabbi Yossi and according to the Chachamim, but we're going to use a weird term. We're going to say Iba is Tema instead of Iba is Zema. So Iba is Tema. Rabbi Yossi,
he was Oker his Nazirus.
No, he was not. In the Mishnah, he thought that he'll be Oker the Nazirus. He thought the Nazirus didn't count at all. That's why he's drinking wine and cutting his hair. But it turns out he really was a Nazir. So the Mishnah says he can count all those days that he was violating the Nazirus towards the Nazirus. So that goes against the Chachamim who says he can't count, and it goes against Rabbi Yossi, who says that at least 30 days he can't count. He has to redo at least 30 days. Up to 30 days he would have to redo that he violated. So Ibai statement. I gave you an example.
I see.
I gave an example. I give a different example. Say he violated 20 days. Okay, whatever. He violated, or I gave a different example. He had a 50-day Nazirus term and he violated 40 days.
You still have to do 30 days.
According to Rabbi Yossi, they still have to do 30 days. Even in the 50-day example, we violated 40 days, so they have to redo 30 days, but not all 40. So Ibai is Tema Rabbi Yossi, Ibai is Tema Rabbanan. So we can explain the Mishnah both according to Rabbi Yossi or according to the Chachamim. Ibai is Tema Rabbi Yossi, no problem. Kan Nazirus Meruba, our Mishnahs talking about the Nazirus Meruba case, when it says he doesn't have to redo the days, it means he doesn't have to redo all the days. So we do 30 days, but if he had violated 40 days out of a 50-day term, so only 30 days have to be redone, but not all of it. Ibai says, so Kaminizirus Meruba, Kaminizirus Muetis. So Ibai is Tema Rabbanan, or we could also explain the Mishnah according to the Chachamim, and just change the wording. Lo tema mishashe nazar. Our Mishnah had said that a person he counts from the time that he had made the nether, which sounds like all the days that he violated counts. So we say, no, we're going to change the wording of the Mishnah a little bit, or at least our understanding of the wording of the Mishnah. To connote kit mishashe nazar, that he has to start from the scratch. That if, for example, he made himself into a nazir, and violated it for 10 days because he thought it didn't count. Now he goes to the Chacham and he discovers that it did count. So now he has to start all over again. In those 10 days, he has to scratch and he starts his count all over again. So we can interpret the Mishnah to be consistent with the opinion of the Chachamim, which is how we assume the halacha. It's a knas. The Rambam says it's a knas. We assume that it's only a penalty, but he would have to repeat the days that he had violated. So nishal Chachamim itziru v'chulei. So we say that if he goes to the Chachamim, however, and the Chachamim say, you know what, the lashon that you used to make yourself into a nazir, it didn't really make yourself into a nazir. It was not really effective. So now we say, even if he had set aside animals to bring us his korban, it turns out those animals were never kadosh altogether. It's a hekdesh toast, right? And they can go out and be sent to pasture. And even Beis Shammai does not disagree with the din in our particular Mishnah. Even Beis Shammai says that normally hekdesh toast is considered to be hekdesh. They agree. In our Mishnah, where it never got off the ground in the first place, they agree that these behemoths are not kodesh. So I'm Rabbi Yirmiyah with Beis Shammai, but the fact that even Beis Shammai agrees that the hekdesh doesn't work in this case, so Nishmal and the Beis Hillel. So we can infer from there to understand better the shita of Beis Hillel. Beis Hillel holds that a hekdesh, a toast, does not count as hekdesh at the tchilas hekdesh, when you're endowing something with a kedusha, but besof hekdesh, when you're making a temurah. So we mentioned yesterday that even Beis Hillel agrees that a hekdesh toast would work if somebody said about a certain animal, I want this animal to receive the kedusha of an animal in front of me, which is an olah, and it really turns out that that animal in front of me was a shlamim, where I say that I wanted to receive the kedusha of this shlamim, and it turns out it was really an olah, it still receives kedusha. But since we see that sometimes, according to Beis Shammai, at the beginning of hekdesh, where they say that hekdesh toast works, it sometimes doesn't work when it's mamish and garnish. So we see that even in the case of tzura, it's not going to work. It's not going to receive sanctity if it's mamish and garnish. And we just have to figure out what case it's a garnish. So labami Beis Shammai hekdesh b'tos havi hekdesh. That even though Beis Shammai normally is of the opinion that hekdesh b'tos is considered to be a hekdesh, but in our particular case, since it turns out that the Naziris never got off the ground altogether, he did not use the proper lashon to become a nazir. We say about the animals, let them simply go out and graze in the pasture, that they're not kadosh altogether, as opposed to, let's say, a case where a person wanted to be a nazir, they just made a mistake, or they made an absolute declaration that they would be a nazir, Harani nazir, but they made a mistake about whether, if the person in front of me is Reuven, and they made a mistake, it turns out the person is Shimon. So then Beis Shammai agrees. Then Beis Shammai holds that it would be hekdesh. But if the person didn't even use a proper lashon to be a nazir altogether, it's mamish and garnish. So then we say the hekdesh doesn't get off the ground. So therefore, the Beis Hillel nami. So we could say the same thing with respect to Beis Hillel in a temurah context, what we call sof hekdesh. Even though they say that in the case of temurah, where the hekdesh of the first animal has already set in, so if I say about a second animal, it's going to be a temurah for the first animal, and I just misdescribe or incorrectly describe the first animal, so then that would be hekdesh. So that's hanimili hecha, and I'm going to explain this the way that the Rivan explains it on the side of the Gemara. Hanimili hecha the isay the ikar hekdesh. That's only if the ikar hekdesh was good, like the first animal really is kaddish. But let's say it turns out that you discover that whatever lashon you used to sanctify the first animal was not a good lashon, or the person was shoel on the first animal. Like it turns out that they uprooted the kedusha of the first animal as well. Where the kedusha of the first animal was completely uprooted. So it turns out when the person said that the second animal is the temurah for the first animal, that the first animal was not kadosh either, because it had lost its kedusha retroactively. So then isakir nami temurah, then Beis Hillel would agree in that case that the second animal would not be kadosh either. Amar iatem modim shilukar l'chi asiri. So
Kedusha wasn't Kedusha wasn't Allah first, and you can't transfer anything. Second,
You got it. It's a very beautiful way of recapitulating it. And the Rivan says that even if it originally had a kedusha, but the person was nishal, the person simply uprooted that kedusha retroactively by being shoel on it. That they went to a chacham or chachamim and abrogated the kedusha, uprooted it from the onset. So then we say retroactively. It turns out that it never was kadosh in the first place, and therefore the tzmur is not gal, even in that case. So Amamar Iatem Modim Shilukarlachi Asira V'Kulei. So what happened? So Beis Shammai brought a proof for their position that Hekdesh Betos is considered to be Hekdesh, because they said to Beis Hillel, don't you agree with us that in the case of Ma'aseh Behema, where the animals are going through the corral, you have to strike them with the 10th animal with a rod and call it Ma'aseh Behema, that we have a Gzeras Akasu, Kol Asher Yabor Tachas Hashavat Yakodesh Lashem, Kol Asher Yabor. Any animal that goes Ha'asiriya Kodesh Lashem, any animal that passes through, that's in the range of Asiri, that's could be the 9th one or the 11th one that you mistakenly call the 10th animal, or you mistakenly call the 10th animal the 9th animal, they're all going to be Kodesh. So we see that Hekdesh Betos is considered to be Hekdesh, and Beis Hillel, of course, retorted, saying, no, that's a special Gzeras Akasu, you can't infer from there. So Idmer, Ma'aser, so how does that din work? How does that Gzeras Akasu work? That if you call the 9th animal 10, the 10th one, and you call the 11th animal the 10th one, that it's still going to be Ma'aseh Behema. Is that only when you did it by mistake, and even when you did it on purpose? On purpose means I knew it was the 9th animal, but I wanted it to be Kadosh, so I decided I'm going to call it the 10th animal. But I know exactly what's going on. I'm doing it willfully and brazenly, and I'm doing it on purpose. So does that count to make it Kadosh, or is it only when I make a mistake? So Nachman Amar, no, it's only when you make a mistake, my goodness. If you did it on purpose, so then the animal, the 9th and the 11th animal would not become Kaddish. However, Chistan and Rabba Barafuna say, and we know that this is the halacha because it has the little letter before the beginning of the wording, to Uso, because you can't cover Nasa. They say, yeah, even if you made a mistake, but certainly if you intended to endow the 9th or the 11th animal with the kedusha Ma'aseh Behema, it would certainly receive kedusha in that case as well. So Amalei Rabba Rav Nachman. So Rabba said to Rav Nachman, who had said even in the case where it was bekavana, it would no, in the case where it would be bekavana, it would not work according to Rav Nachman. So Rabba said to Rav Nachman, according to you, that it would only work in the case of tos, and not in the case of kavana. Deduct amis tauso below kavana so to ka'amri. So then I don't understand something. When Beis Shammai says to Beis Hillel, "Iatem modim shilu kara l'tshi asiri u'asiri t'shi u'achadasar asiri sheshlashta mikudashin." When Beis Shammai brought this proof to Beis Hillel, that we see from here that Hekdesh tos is considered to be Hekdesh, and Beis Hillel, rather than giving an explanation of saying no, that case works through a different mechanism because it only works when it's being done by mistake. Beis Hillel could have said that, but instead Beis Hillel just got out of it in a different way by saying, oh, that's a special Gzeras HaKasuv, and I can't extrapolate from that special Gzeras HaKasuv. They didn't have to pull the Gzeras HaKasuv card. They could have simply said, no, that case works differently because it only works in the case of toes. V'shtiku Beis Hillel, instead of, Beis Hillel didn't give an argument on the merits, they just said, oh, that's a special case. Limri Lahon, they could have argued on the merits, and they could have said, according to Rav Nachman, no. That case is very different because it only works when it's betos. Ma'ala Maser, shekain eno kadosh bekavana. The case of Maser, if you did it on purpose, so then it's not going to count. If the person had the kavana, so then it wouldn't count. As opposed to a case of a hekdesh tos, where a person, really had, the kavana for something to become hekdesh, just, made a mistake regarding some of the facts. I'm sorry, what?
So according to Beis Hillel, in do Ma'aser Behema with mistaken animals on purpose.
Well, we're actually in the middle of a theoretical discussion. So the theoretical discussion is, if Beis Hillel would have held that way, in the event that Beis Hillel held that it only would work in the case of tos, and not in the case of kavana, so they could have brought that as a counter argument to Beis Shammai. But the fact that they didn't bring that as a counter argument to Beis Shammai so shows that they really are held that that it would work whether it was betos or whether it was bekavana. Because otherwise they should have said to Beis Shammai, they should have said to them, Ma'ala Maser she'eno kadosh bekavana. So Amar Shimi Barashi says no, they wouldn't have been able to make that argument. Haino taima delo mi lahon. because a Beis Shammai would have been able to retort it to a Beis Hillel that no, that would only be a Kavachomer, the Kavachomer. That if even in the case of Maser, where it's only when the person makes a mistake that the 9th and the 11th animals become Kadosh, but not if it would be B'Kavana, it would still be Kadosh. So Kadosh B'Taos, so Hekdesh, Kadosh B'Kavana, Lo Kol Shekain. So Hekdesh, where a person generally can make a particular animal or thing sanctified B'Kavana, even if it's under mistaken pretenses, that it should be good. So therefore, that's the reason why Beis Hillel would not have been able to make that retort. So we say, no, Beis Hillel really could have made that retort. Below they could have made that retort because it's a very clear distinction that they could have explained to Beis Shammai, that they could have said, no, it's very different because the Hekdesh, the Daite, the Mare Tali. Then when it comes to Hekdesh, it all depends upon what a person wants to effectuate, as opposed to the case of Ma'aseh Be'ema, where it's all about the counting. It's all about the counting. That's the way that it's described. The Kol Asher Yavur Takas Hashevet, Hasiri Kodesh Lashem. It's all about the counting. So therefore, I can't extrapolate from something which happens just through counting, where it only works Patos, to a case of Hekdesh, where it's not about counting, but it's about having specific intent. So then in that case, we could say Hekdesh Patos would not work. The fact that Beis Hillel it did not make that argument shows that Beis Hillel was of the opinion that in the case of Ma'aseh Be'ema, it works not only when it's done by mistake, but even when it's done by kavana. So therefore, it would have been a good argument on the part of Beis Shammai, if not for the fact that Beis Hillel explained that's a special Gzeirus HaKosov, and I can't extrapolate from that special Gzeirus HaKosov case. Okay, now onto the mission.
What do we do?
You bring it as a korban. You don't have to give it to a Kohen. Yisrael can bring the Ma'aseh Be'ema all by himself. But it has to be brought on the mizbeach, and then it's eaten. Basically similar to like a korban shlom. Okay, misha nadam and nazir. If a person takes a neder that he wants to be a nazir, and he goes here, he thought he had an animal. No, he said I have these extra animals, so I'm going to bring, one is a chatas, one is an ola, one is a shlamim, and I'm going to make myself into a nazir. So I'll have like some use to put to these animals. Like he inherited a bunch of animals, whatever, an animal farm. And then now he says, okay, so I'll make myself a nazir so I can do something useful with these animals. And now he makes himself into a nazir. He goes to the farm to pick up the animals. And guess what? It turns out they are gone. They were stolen. Okay, they were stolen by the animal. Billy the kid came along and stole those animals. They're gone. So he says, whoa. I wouldn't have made myself into a nazir had I known that I had no animals to make. So if at the time that he made himself to a nazir, the animals had not yet gotten stolen, they got stolen the next day, so then he's still a nazir. Hooray, a nazir because that's considered to be nola. That's considered to be a new circumstance, and we don't undo a neder based on nola, based on a new circumstance. However, top of page lamed base, amid base, but if it turns out that at the time in which he took his vow of Nazirus, the animals had already been stolen, so then Eino Nazir. So then at the time of his Nazirus,
before you say it, right? You don't just.
He thought his animals were there in the farm, right? But so he was very organized. He was a yeki, so he was very organized to make sure he'd have all of his animals set up even before he took his vow of Nazirus. Everything. But then it turned out. He discovered that the animals had been stolen the previous day. So it was all done based on mistaken pretenses at the time of the neder. So that's a toast. So therefore, Eino Nazir. Vizu, and this was a mistake. And the Nachum Amadei made a mistake here. Vizu toast, Nachum Amadei. Okay, anybody can make a mistake, so we don't consider it to be an embarrassment. To mention the Mishnah for like all of eternity, Nachum Amadei made a mistake because, if you're a chacham, so you make a mistake sometimes. It's fine, you get over it. Yisha'alu Nazirim in a gola. When the Nazirim came back from Galus, okay, Umatzu Beis Hamikdash Charav, and they discovered that the Beis Hamikdash, this is after Bayesheni. Remember, during the period of Bayesheni, there were some people who just lived in Galus altogether. They never came from Babel. So we have people who are living in Galus, and they didn't know. They didn't get the news. They didn't read the newspaper. They didn't listen to the radio. They didn't know that the Beis Hamikdash, the second Beis Hamikdash, had been destroyed. So they thought, they're going to make themselves a Nazirim and that they'll bring their korbanos at the end of the 30 days. And they come to Yerushalayim and discover, the Beis Hamikdash has been destroyed. Matzah Beis Hamikdash Charb. So Amalem Nachum Amadei. So Nachum Amadei said to these people who came from the Golos, he said, well, let's try to find the way out of your neder. Either Ayisim Yodim, Shebeis Hamikdash Charb. Had you known that the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed or would have been destroyed, even though at the time that they took the neder, the Beis Hamikdash had not necessarily been destroyed, Hayisim Nozrim, would you have taken the neder to become Nazirim? So Amullah, well, no way, because we wouldn't be able to bring our Kabbana. So Amullah, B'tiva Nachum Amadei, and he said, okay, mutalach, 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 despite the fact that in many of these cases, the Beis Hamikdash was only destroyed after they took their neder, in which case it was Nolan. So when the matter came in front of the other Chachamim, they said, no, that's not correct, Nachum Amadei. Amru lo kol shenazar ashlo char Beis Hamikdash nazir. You have to distinguish between two different groups. Those people who took their neder before the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, they are nazir because that's nolan. Shekar Beis Hamikdash and a nazir. But if it turns out that they took their neder after the Beis Hamikdash had been destroyed, so then they would not have the status of nazirim. So Amar Rabba, you have to distinguish between those two circumstances. So Amar Rabba, so Rabba actually should be Rabba according to the emendations on the side. Amar Rabba. Shatfua Rabban and Rabbi Eliezer, the Chachamim overwhelmed. They overwhelmed Rabbi Eliezer, and they convinced Rabbi Eliezer to go along with their sheet. The notes of Rabbi Eliezer in Maseches Nidarim was of the opinion that poskim minola, that you're allowed to undo a neder based on circumstances that occurred after the neder. To say, well, had you known that this would happen afterwards, so would you have taken the neder? And they say, no, I wouldn't have. So he said, great, okay, so I'm going to nullify your neder. And the Chachamim said, no, you can't do that if it's circumstances that only arose afterwards. So in our Mishnah, you will notice that Rabbi Eliezer does not agree with the premise of our Mishnah, that if it would be nolad, then you wouldn't be able to undo the neder. So by the time we came around to Maseches Nazir, which we know comes after Maseches Nedarim, because we all learned Daf Yomi, so Rabbi Eliezer changed his mind that the Chachamim had been able to overwhelm him with their opinion. They got him to agree to their sheet. It's not because the earlier on in Maseches Nedarim it said poskim in nolad that you can undo an neder through nolad, a new circumstance. To Rabbi Eliezer, but Rabbi Eliezer coming also come and say no. And here we see that Rabbi Eliezer came around to the opinion of the Chachamim because he didn't disagree in our Mishnah. Rabba further said, "Avagav to Amar Rabbanan in poskim in nolad." Even though the Chachamim say that we don't find a hatch, an escape hatch, through nolad, through a new circumstance, but you can find an escape hatch through kind of a poskim b'tanai nolad, a theoretical nolad that had it existed at the time of the neder, so you can undo a neder that way. Like if you say to the person, had you been told at the time you took your neder that the Beis Hamikdash had been destroyed, even though it wasn't really destroyed, had you received the false information, fake news, at the time in which you took your neder, would you have taken it at that time? The person says, no, had I thought the Beis Hamikdash had already been destroyed, I wouldn't take my neder, that would be good enough to undo the neder. About poskim b'tanai nolad, the Rambam doesn't seem to codify this idea, but it is codified in the Shulchan Aruch. Hechidami, ami lahon. So you say to the person, ilu asa inish, if a fake newsmaster would have come to you, and they would have put out on Twitter or whatever that the Beis Hamikdash has been destroyed, would you have taken the neder? So the person says no, even if it was false information, they wouldn't have taken the neder. That would be good enough to undo the neder. Amar Rav Yosef, Iva Habai Hasam. So if Yosef says,
even on the basis of fake news, and
That's valid.
and that's good. That's
Right.
reality.
yeah, except I mean it's not reality because Beis Hamikdash really would have been standing, but the person made a mistake. They still wouldn't have taken the neder had they believed the fake news that the Beis Hamikdash had been destroyed. Right. So that would be good enough to undo the neder. So I'm Rav Yosef. So Rav Yosef says, if I had been there at the time in which they were dealing with this question of those people who took a neder after the Beis Hamikdash had been destroyed, not knowing that the Beis Hamikdash had been destroyed, I would have said to them, how in the world could you have taken the neder in the first place? It's not necessarily a halakhic statement, it says Tosfos. Hava mina lahon haksiv, we have a nevuah that was given over to Yirmiyahu Navi. That Yirmiyahu Navi was told, you got to tell those people not to believe the fake prophets who say nothing's going to happen, because the Beis Hamikdash is going to be destroyed. Heikel Hashem, Heikel Hashem, Heikel Hashem, Hema. It says Heikel Hashem 3 times. The first could be the way the Mefarish explains. The first time is a shvua. It's a shvua that the first base of Mikdash will be destroyed. The first Heichal Hashem is a shvua. Second Heichal Hashem is the first base of Mikdash will be destroyed. The second Heichal Hashem is the second base of Mikdash have been destroyed. They were told that they should have known the base of Mikdash will be destroyed. So what business did they have taking a vow to be a Nazir and thinking that they're going to bring their kavanas to the base of Mikdash when they should have known the base of Mikdash will be destroyed? The way Tosfos learns it is there. It's a reference to the three Batei Mikdashos, that the first two are going to be destroyed and the third one won't be destroyed. The third one will be Haman. The third one's going to last forever. Okay. So what is this? So what is this? Zeh Mikdash Rishon Mikdash Sheni. Either way, however you teach it, it teaches you that the first base of Mikdash and the second base of Mikdash are going to be destroyed. So shouldn't they have known that it would be destroyed? So he said, well, yeah. I mean, the people in Galus knew that it would eventually be destroyed, but they didn't know when it would be destroyed. We're holding in the time of the second base of Mikdash. They didn't know when it would be destroyed. They didn't necessarily know that it's going to be destroyed that week. So Amar Abaye, what do you mean they didn't know? It was forecast by none other than Daniel. Back at Siv, it says in Sefer Daniel, it says Shivuayim. What does the pasuk say? Shivuayim Shivim Nechtach Al Amcha V'Al Ir Kadshecha L'Chali Apesho L'Hasei Makatas L'Chape Obon. That there's going to be a vengeance, what against the people. That the base of Mikdash is going to be destroyed. You're going to have Shivuayim, which is Shivim, 70 Shmitim. It's going to be 400 Shvuayim Shivim means it's going to be 70 Shmitos, which is a total of what? 490 years, which was being forecast at the beginning of Golus Bava, which was 70 years, and then another 420 years of Bayesheni. So they would know that exactly after 420 years of Bayesheni, everybody knew the base of Mikdash was going to be destroyed. Because he says the Gemara, no. They may have known that, and this would be obviously subject to they're not repenting from their ways, but they could have seen that, people had not repented from their ways, so therefore they would know that the nebuah would come true. But they say, no, but they still didn't necessarily know which day of the year. Like it could be like they took their vow in Tishrei and they figured that the base of Mikdash is going to be destroyed until like Chodesh Av. That's like the typical time the base of Mikdash just get destroyed. So they figure, that they're okay. Or that it's the beginning of Chodesh Av, and they figure maybe it'll hold out until the end of Chodesh Av. So they didn't necessarily know exactly what day it would be destroyed. So that's why they took their vow, even though it was during that year. Okay, Naya Mishnah, Hayim Malcolm Adera. I have 6 of men. We had this Mishnah before because we mentioned it in the course of our Shakla V'Tarya yesterday. And we have 6 men who were walking on the street. And now one guy comes near them, and it's a little bit hazy out, a little cloudy. You can't tell 100% who the guy is. So Amar Echan Me'en. So one of the 6 men says, "Hareni Nazir Shezeh Ploni." I'm a Nazir. That's assuming that this is Reuven. Ve'echan Amar Hareni Nazir She'ein Zeh Ploni. And the second one says, "No, I'm a Nazir that it's not Reuven, but rather it's Shimon." That's the way that sometimes she says explicitly Shimon. So it could have actually been Levi. Hareni Nazir She'echan Mikem a Nazir. And then the third guy says, I'm a Nazir, at least one of you is a Nazir. Could be he's wrong, because maybe it's neither Reuven nor Shimon, it's actually Levi. Shein echad mikem Nazir. And then so one of them says, I'm a Nazir, if neither of you are a Nazir. Sheshnechem Nazir, I'm a Nazir, both of you are Nazir. And one of them says, I'm a Nazir, shkuchem Nazir, and that all 5 of you are Nazirim. So Beis Shammai says, it doesn't matter that some of them, at least some of them are going to be mistaken, since they used an unambiguous lashon of Hareni Nazir. So that's going to make them into Nazirim. Yomim Kula Nazirim in that particular case, because even Hekdesh Betos is considered to be Hekdesh. Vesilomim, no. Hekdesh Betos is not considered to be Hekdesh. Eno Nazir, Elamish Loni Sky Mador. The only one as a Nazir is the one that it turned out not to be that way. What do you mean not to be that way? It should be the only one as a Nazir is the one where it turned out to be that way. That's what the Gemara is going to talk about. Rabbi Tarfon Omer Enechan Miyam Nazir. Rabbi Tarfon says, even if it turns out the person was accurate, since they didn't know for sure that their statement was 100% accurate when they made their statement, therefore, none of them are considered to be a Nazir, because Nazirus requires a high level of hafla, a high level of das, of understanding, of awareness, and since there wasn't complete awareness, none of them are considered to be a Nazir. If this person were never able to discover who this dark and mysterious stranger was, the person who suddenly appeared on the street then falls backwards, and nobody's able to figure out, and he runs away, and you can't figure out who he was. Eno Nazir. So then we say that since that we can't clarify afterwards that any of them really had their condition fulfilled, so then nobody would be a Nazir. Rabbi Shimon Omer, Rabbi Shimon says that the reason is because you can't bring korbanos. can't, because you won't know whether Nazirus was really Chal. Rabbi Shimon says, no, you really could, because Yomar, you can say, Im Hayakid Barai or any Nazir Choba. You could say, if it turned out that the person who ran away really was Reuben, and I said, I'm going to be a Nazir if it's Reuben, so then bring your kabbalas and say, I'm bringing it as a Nazir Choba based on my previous vow. Another way say that I'm volunteering a new vow of Nazirus, not based on it being Reuben. I'm already Nazir Nadava. And either way, you'd be able to bring the kabbalas. So now the Gemara says, and that the practice of Rabbi Shimon didn't say have the first two people just bring a korban together and say, well, if it was Reuben, then it's a vow for, then it's a Nazirus for the first guy. And if it wasn't Reuben, it's a Nazirus for the second guy. So that's why sometimes you and say the reason Rabbi Shimon didn't say that is because the first two guys didn't say, oh, either it's Reuben or it's not Reuben. They said either it's Reuben or it's Shimon, and we're worried that maybe it was Levi. Now the Gemara says, Mishlon is Skaimu.
Should we stop here?
No, because we always go to the next Amud. And don't you know the rule? Mishlon is Skaimu Dvara. So the Mishnah says, what do you mean? Mishlon is Skaimu Dvara. The person should be a Nazir if it turned out that it really was true. Am I having Nazir? So Rav Yehuda says, Ema Mishin is Skaimu Dvara. So he says that no, so change it, Taich to say Mishin is Skaimu Dvara. And Abayamar, the Abai says, Kigonda Amar Inami Laploniu. So it says, no, it's talking about Shinloni Skaimu Dvara, where the person, your first person, changed their condition in the middle. It's like a Token de Dibur thing. First he said, I'm a Nazir if it'll be Reuven. Then he says, oh, you know what? I'll be a Nazir if it's not Reuven. So he says, Yavi Nazir, Inami Laploniu, Yavi Nazir. So then we say, that it turns out that it's not Reuven. Rishonim, it's the Torah Rishonim was that he wanted it to be Reuven to be a Nazir. That it turned out that no, it wasn't Reuven, and that's why he's a Nazir, because we follow his second lashon because Tok de Dibur. Okay, so Sunday we have Hashem. We'll be at 7 o'clock. Everybody have a good Shabbat.